Welcome to the Cosmetic Podcast.
This podcast amplifies the topics you want to hear about.
Cosmetic means being a person or thing that gives rise to a phenomenon that is dynamic or energizing.
Globally minded and locally focused.
I'm Keith Benson.
And I'm Rodrigo Ross.
And so today we're going to talk about the strength of stories.
Storytelling's a good narrative.
It is, because it's so powerful. I mean, stories, if you have that person up there that's telling that right story, they're going to try to engage you, try to pull you in, and you're just like sitting on edge waiting for whether it be the punchline or whether, the height of the story to see what that end result is going to be. It has this, stories have real influence to be able to change the minds of people to move them along in a process.
I'm so glad that you're saying this, because this is what I use when I'm talking to you, right? I'm trying to tell you a good story. I'm trying to explain things to you. You're looking at me like, could you get to the bottom line, please?
Well, no, but sometimes, you drag out a little bit.
I have great storytelling abilities.
You do.
Thank you.
You do.
Thank you.
Stories go way back.
Back.
It predates writing. And so the earliest forms of storytelling were usually either oral or they combine with some gestures or expression. As I'm talking to you right now, I got expressions going on.
I use that, Keith. I am so ahead of my time. I use those very same. See, I knew I was ahead of my time. Since a kid, I knew it.
Well, it said predate. So you're saying that you were back in the
there you
original?
Go. Again. There you go again.
So when you talk about storytelling, though, it does describe the social and cultural activity, sharing.
Yeah, like for so many folks, before you got to write history in a book, right? This is the way that generations culturally pass down their history through storytelling.
I mean, it comes in different forms. I mean, you go way back, you got the stories that written on rocks, right?
Yeah.
And you got the whole folklore deal going on where stories are being passed down and passed down. And then you have stories of, like the guys going fishing.
Oh, what did they do when they went fishing?
Well, depending on
who told the story.
So my fish goes from being a little minnow that I may have caught to, I caught the big one.
I caught a shark in that little pond outside the house there. Okay. But I get it. But see, that's how so universally, there are some components. Like there's a little bit of a science to this. There are components to a good story, right? So setting, you got to set the setting. This wasn't a little pond. It was in the middle of the ocean.
Yes.
Where I caught this shark, right? You got to set the atmosphere. Now, listen, these are all of the things that I do when I'm telling you stories. So I want you to listen, right? Characterization. Like, you got to understand the backstory of the characters. When I try to give you the backstory, you're like, what does this have to do with the story? You got to give the themes, right? You got to give the point of view. And like you said, figurative language and literary devices. I'm ahead of my time, Keith. I'm a master storyteller.
I know. You've been doing it for a long time.
I don't really know if that's a compliment, but okay.
Story, the thing I like about storytelling, it has this ability to connect people together.
Yeah.
Whether that be in your family, you're sitting around at the family reunion telling stories, whether that be in the workplace or how you tee up something. Because there's a way that you can come across. So, let's say you got these two companies. So company A, for an example, that leader may present the financial results for a quarter. At company B, that leader tells a rich story about all the wins that took place to get to those great results there. Versus, this month we are $2,000 to the good. Like, there was a way that you got to that $2,000 to the good. Like, let's talk about the win. Let's give some people some credit along the way. And because it allows people, especially in the workforce, it allows for them to be, have something to reach towards versus just this bottom line black and white number. And so our organizations can truly be revived if we start talking about financials really in this different way, because when we get to the financials of something and the CFO is coming up, everybody's goes, I
love our CFO though. He's great.
CFO, that's my dude.
He's amazing.
That's my dude.
But I kind of do want to hear him tell a story. Now that you say it,
every once in a while,
even
within the losses, there's some wins in there.
Here's a story. agree with
like
all
yes,
that.
we gotta improve in some areas, but man, give me the shining light within all this. Something is in there that I can see at the end of the tunnel versus
some literary
just,
device
Yes.
taking. Yeah. And you know, there is a science to storytelling, right? So there was this study that was done where there was a person who was telling the story, and then there were the people who were listening to the story, and they were all getting MRI scans at the same time, right? And what the MRI scans showed was that people who used storytelling in their narratives or as they're explaining stuff, the people who are listening, their brain patterns started to mimic the brain patterns of the storyteller. So they literally were feeling exactly and experiencing exactly what the storyteller was experiencing and feeling at that very moment. Whereas people who don't use stories and just kind of get to the bottom line, when they were taking MRIs and looking at brain scans, the person who was reporting or talking had one set of scans, and then the person that was listening had another set, and they were totally disconnected. So there is a science to storytelling. Like, it really does bring people together because they start to feel the very same thing. That was so amazing to me.
So there's data out there that shows that 40% of a group, they're like these visual learners. So they got to, they got to see things, so they may have videos, may have diagrams, or some illustrations there. Another 40%, they learn through lectures and the discussion. And then there's that 20%. That 20% is they learn best by doing or experiencing. And then when you talk about storytelling, it brings all three of those types of learners together. Everybody has some appreciation in that when somebody tells that story. So your visual learner, they appreciate that mental picture. So a good storyteller would set that up.
Yes,
they can see the person that was in the red jacket that as they were walking. I mean, they can set that up right there. We're talking about in the business world, in our case, the YMCA. When we talk about those wins in the financial, we can tell that story about how we interacted with that young person and how we had 100 teens, and as the teens were gathering together, I mean, you that tells a better picture. Just that bottom line, black and white there.
So I use storytelling around that fundraising and philanthropy space, right? So as I'm telling the story, I'm really trying to paint the picture on why someone or some foundation should really invest in the YMCA. I look for a couple of triggers in the people. I'm watching the people watching me watching the people, right? So I'm looking at them, and if they start to blink faster, right? Or if their facial expressions shift, or if I see that the eyebrows were raised, right? Or they're reacting to a word, I'm like, got him. I'm going in. And that will make me move the comma. I was going to ask for $10, but now I'm going to ask for $10,000 because I think you really into this story right now.
Exactly. So think about like when our doors, quote unquote, were closed.
Yes.
Like the picture that paints is that there's nothing that's going on.
Nothing.
But man, let me tell you about the Callus Initiative that you enacted, right? And so when we talk about hundreds of people that were literally in the line, they were, we were handing out food. We had volunteers. We were social distancing. People had on gloves. People had on masks. People were grateful when they came through the line. I mean, that tells a whole different story than our doors were closed.
The Y was closed.
No. We never closed.
We
never
pivoted.
Closed.
We got at working with the most, sometimes forgotten populations, and we dug deep and we did what we had to do, and we pulled all our partners together, and then we were the champions because 45,000 families received food. We didn't just say, we had to shut down our buildings and sanitize.
But the thing is,
although we did, we shut them down and sanitized, but that's not the whole story.
Nonprofits have the best stories.
Yes.
But yet we are our own worst enemies sometimes.
About telling them. I agree.
We got to tell the world. In order for people to really understand what we're doing in this space right here, we got to be able to tell that story.
You got to be able to tell
that when you're in that conversation, like, you got to know when to move that comma. Like,
right.
I think I can add another zero to this.
I think I got him. But you know, the thing that I do try to balance in the storytelling is being respectful of maybe the people or the family that are the subject matter, right? Like I very rarely use names or identifying factors, right? Because there's a fine line between telling someone's story so that you can get what's needed to help them be their best, or just kind of using sometimes unfortunate experiences as propaganda, right? So it's a fine line, but I feel like many people, they appreciate the telling of their story, right? Especially from people who really know how to tell a story. And some of them are okay with telling a story because they feel like if their lived experience will help someone else avoid something, then go ahead and tell that story. And it doesn't have to be fancy, and you don't have to have $10 words. You just have to connect emotionally with what's going on.
You know, the people that we're helping, they want to tell their story because they are truly appreciative of the work that we're doing.
I agree.
You know, it's like, hey, you guys are helping me to get a hand up. When you're able to watch my child, you know, after school and I have to work, man, there's great appreciation in that. My child has their homework done by the time they get home. So now we can just spend some time together. You know, I can come in the house. I may have to fix dinner. And while I'm fixing dinner, you know, me and my child can just talk. I mean, those little time, giving that parent that time back, right? They're appreciative of that right there. So they want to get on the video, they want to get on the blog or whatever to be able to share their story. And we gotta bring those individuals in to be able to share that story.
Yeah, I love when people tell their story. Like if even the most skilled storyteller and the people who really work at this and practice, to me, they're never better than the person who's experienced it, right? Like the person telling their own story is always going to be so much more profound.
Yeah, it's just powerful. Storytelling is powerful, and you got to get out there and tell those who are in the nonprofit space, you got to figure out how you get out there and tell the story. And it's not just the financial development director that needs to tell the story. The program director, the executive director, all levels of the organization got to figure out how do you tell your story in this way to let people know about the experiences that are going on in your workplace.
Tell your story. Tell stories that you've experienced. Tell of the good things that you've seen. You know, some people shy away from telling their own story. And I will tell you, as of late, especially since I'm experiencing kind of this transition right now, lots of people are asking me about my personal story. And I don't know if I've ever had a time in my career where so many people were just really interested in, okay, well what got you here? And I really had to think about, I think I've built my skill set in telling other people's story, but I have to tell my own because there are probably other professionals or other up-and-comers or people who are just considering something that could be benefited from telling my story.
Yeah, you're in a powerful place right now as Vice President of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. You're going to have the opportunity to be able to tell that story about your experience. And people, I mean, you got to make it personal.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it's not just because you have a title, you have, and this experience in this space right here. It got to be a personal.
Yeah,
so
there's a vulnerability in that. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, we'd love to hear about some of your favorite stories or a time when you told a story and you felt like it made a difference. And thank you for listening to Cosnetic,
where our conversations are global,
globally minded, and locally focused.
Give us a shout out at www.ymcadallas.org/Cosnetic.
And as always,
stay dynamic,
stay energized,
stay Cosnetic.